Malik Johnson was born on a sweltering summer night in 1987, in a dilapidated apartment complex on the south side of Atlanta. The windows were cracked, the paint peeled off in flakes, and the hum of broken streetlights buzzed through the humid air like static. His mother, Patricia Johnson, a strong, God-fearing woman, worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. His father? He was long gone by the time Malik could walk, just another shadow swallowed by the system, arrested for a crime he didn't commit, or maybe one he did. Either way, the system didn't care. From a young age, Malik learned the rules of survival in a world that seemed rigged against him. By 6, he was walking his younger brother, Jamal, to kindergarten, making sure Jamal didn't wander off and get into trouble. By 10, Malik knew how to stretch $1 at the corner store, buying rice and beans and a little pack of Kool-Aid to make it through the week. His childhood wasn't filled with birthday parties or family vacations, it was filled with sirens in the night, the distant pop of gunfire, and the sharp sting of being followed around by store clerks who thought he might steal. School was no safe haven either. Malik was smart, he loved to read, especially about science and space exploration. But being a black boy who loved books made him a target. The white kids in his class mocked him, calling him names behind the teacher's back. The teachers, mostly white themselves, looked through him like he was invisible or treated him like he was trouble waiting to happen. He remembered one day in 4th grade when Officer Brad Collins, a cop assigned to the local school, yanked Malik out of class because someone accused him of stealing a pencil. No apology when they realized it was a mistake, just a cold glare and a muttered warning, "Watch yourself, boy." Malik tried not to let it break him. His mother's voice rang in his head every time he wanted to give up. "You gotta be better than they expect. You gotta work twice as hard for half the reward. And don't you ever let them see you give up." By the time he was 17, Malik had a part-time job at a local grocery store, sweeping floors and stacking shelves. He didn't have time for sports or parties, he was too busy helping his mom pay the rent. Tyrone, his childhood friend, had taken a different path. He ran with a crew that sold drugs on the corner, quick money that came with quick danger. Malik loved Tyrone like a brother, but he couldn't follow him down that road. Deep down, Malik knew he wanted something more, even if he didn't know exactly what. Then came that one rainy afternoon in downtown Atlanta, a day that would change everything. Malik had just finished a long shift hauling boxes at a local warehouse. His feet ached, and his clothes were damp from the drizzle that had been falling since morning. He stood at the bus stop, waiting for the number 32 bus, when he noticed her, an older white woman, maybe in her early 60s, struggling to push a shopping cart overflowing with groceries toward a sleek black SUV parked across the street. She looked frustrated, glancing around as if hoping someone would help her. But most people passed by without a second glance, just another rich woman in designer clothes with too many bags to carry. Something about the way she struggled, half proud, half desperate, caught Malik's eye. He hesitated, thinking about how people might look at him, a young black man in a hoodie approaching an older white woman in a deserted parking lot. He could already feel the suspicion in the air. But then, he thought about his mother, about the lessons she had drilled into him about kindness, about doing the right thing even when the world doesn't expect it of you. With a deep breath, Malik stepped off the curb and crossed the street toward the woman. She didn't see him at first until he spoke softly, his voice steady and calm. "Ma'am, would you like some help with those bags?" Her head snapped up, and for a moment, the look in her eyes was pure fear. Her grip on the cart tightened, and her lips pressed into a thin line. Malik raised his hand slightly, a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just saw you needed help." There was a long pause, a moment so thick it could be cut with a knife. Rain dripped from the edges of Malik's hoodie, the wind tugging at the ends of Eleanor's silk scarf. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then, she nodded, just a quick, hesitant nod, as if unsure of her own decision. "All right, if you don't mind," she said quietly, her voice shaky. Malik smiled, just a small, polite smile, and stepped forward to grab the heavier bags. As they walked together toward her car, Eleanor stealing glances at him, Malik felt something shift deep inside, a small, flickering light in the darkness. But this was just the beginning. As they walked through the rain-soaked parking lot, Malik could feel the weight of the woman's gaze on him. It wasn't the first time he'd felt that kind of stare, a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and something else. But he focused on the bags in his hands, heavy with organic produce, bottled water, and a bottle of expensive red wine peeking out from the top. Eleanor tried to make small talk as they reached the SUV. "I don't usually shop here on a Saturday," she said, her voice tight, as if explaining herself. Malik nodded politely but didn't say much. His focus was on getting the bags safely to the car. As he placed the last bag into the trunk, Eleanor fumbled with her car keys, almost dropping them in the puddle at her feet. Malik's reflexes kicked in. He caught the keys just in time, holding them out to her with a gentle smile. "Careful there, ma'am," he said. Eleanor took the keys, her hand brushing his for a brief moment. She flinched as if shocked, quickly pulling her hand away. The moment was so fleeting, yet it lingered, an awkward silence stretching between them, filled with unspoken assumptions and centuries of history. Then, to Malik's surprise, she let out a breathy, almost embarrassed laugh. "I guess I'm a bit of a mess today," she admitted, tucking a stray lock of damp hair behind her ear. Malik chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "We all have those days." That small, shared moment seemed to break the tension. Eleanor hesitated, then finally asked, "What's your name?" "Malik," he replied, standing a little straighter. "Malik. That's a strong name," she said, almost to herself. "And you, ma'am?" "Eleanor. Eleanor Whitmore." Malik blinked. The name rang a bell. He'd seen it on the side of buildings in downtown Atlanta. Whitmore Enterprises. Real estate, law firms, charities. Whitmore was a name that carried weight in the city. For a moment, Malik wondered if she knew what it was like to struggle. "Nice to meet you, Eleanor," he said, choosing his words carefully. Eleanor seemed about to say something else, but a sudden gust of wind sent her scarf flying. Instinctively, Malik dashed after it, his long strides catching the silk fabric just before it landed in a muddy puddle. He handed it back to her with a grin. "Wouldn't want you to lose this," he said. Eleanor took the scarf with a surprised laugh, her eyes softening. And then, something unexpected happened. "Wait here a moment," she said, opening her car door and rummaging through her purse. Malik shifted uneasily, unsure if she was going to offer him a tip or worse, call someone. But instead, Eleanor handed him a card. "My son, Daniel, runs a community center in the city. They're always looking for volunteers. If you're ever interested." Malik took the card, staring at it in disbelief. He wasn't sure what surprised him more, that she trusted him enough to offer an opportunity, or that she assumed he needed one. "I'll think about it," he said quietly, tucking the card into his pocket. As she drove away, Malik stood in the parking lot, the rain still falling, the card heavy in his hand. A strange mix of emotions churned in his chest, hope, doubt, and a nagging voice in the back of his mind that whispered, "Don't get your hopes up, man. People like her don't change." But part of him, the part that still believed in kindness despite everything, wondered if maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of the story. He didn't know it yet, but that small act of helping a stranger would soon set off a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself, about Eleanor, and about the world they lived in. Because life had a way of throwing the unexpected at you when you least expected it. And Malik's journey was just beginning. The morning sun filtered through the dusty blinds of Malik's modest apartment, casting soft golden lines across the chipped countertop and worn linoleum floor. He sat at the small kitchen table, staring down at the business card Eleanor had given him the day before. It was elegant but simple ivory cardstock with embossed navy blue lettering. It read, "Daniel Whitmore, Director, Whitmore Community Center." Beneath the name, in fine print, was a motto, * uplifting through unity. *. Malik turned the card over slowly, letting the weight of it settle into his fingers. For a moment, he just sat in silence, trying to process everything. A day ago, he was unloading groceries for an elderly white woman he'd never met. Now, she'd invited him to a community center run by her son, an invitation that felt both surreal and suspicious. Why him? What did they really want? He exhaled and remembered something his mother used to say when he was young and life felt like one long uphill battle, * sometimes, baby, God cracks a door open for you. Ain't your job to question it, just walk through it before it slams shut. *. And so, he did. The Whitmore Community Center stood on the edge of the downtown district, surrounded by a patchwork of neighborhoods, some revitalized, others still clawing their way out of generational neglect. The building itself was bright and alive, with murals stretching across the outer walls. Children of all races held hands, their faces joyful and animated, against backdrops of city skylines, farmlands, and blue skies filled with kites and birds. It was a promise painted in color, a future where everyone belonged. Malik hesitated at the entrance, glancing down at his boots. They were clean, but scuffed and old. His jeans were faded, his hoodie stretched at the sleeves. He rubbed his palms against his thighs and stepped inside. The scent of brewed coffee, pencil shavings, and something sweet, maybe banana bread, greeted him as he entered. Volunteers bustled through the lobby, young people sorting canned goods, elderly women arranging donated coats, teenagers helping little ones with homework at round tables. At the front desk, a young woman with curly hair and an infectious smile greeted him. "Hi there. You must be Malik, right?" He blinked. Yeah. That obvious?" She laughed. "Daniel said to expect you. Follow me." She led him down a wide hallway lined with photographs, black and white portraits of past events, smiling faces of every shape and hue, and plaques commemorating years of service. At the end of the hallway, a glass door opened into a spacious office where a tall man in his 30s stood up from behind a desk. "Malik Johnson," the man said, walking over and extending a hand. "I'm Daniel. My mom told me about you." Malik shook his hand, still cautious. "She tell you I almost dropped her grapefruit juice?" Daniel laughed. "She told me you treated her with respect. That's rare these days. And that you didn't expect anything in return. That's even rarer." They sat. Daniel didn't dive into questions about work history or criminal records. Instead, he asked Malik about his childhood, his dreams, the neighborhoods he'd lived in, and the people who'd shaped him. "I used to want to teach," Malik admitted, almost embarrassed to say it. "Back when I thought that was still possible." "It still is," Daniel said gently. "We could use someone like you around here. I'm not offering a job, not yet. But how about you start volunteering? Help with the boys after school. Get a feel for the place." Malik left the center that day with a strange feeling in his chest. Not dread. Not cynicism. Hope. Within a week, he was returning daily. At first, he stacked food pantry shelves and swept the gym floor. But soon, he began working with the youth, a rough bunch of inner-city kids, most of them teetering between promise and peril. He saw himself in them. Their anger. Their suspicion. Their resilience. There was Jamal, 10 years old, with eyes too serious for his age. Suspended twice for fighting. Quick to lash out. Smart, though. Quick with numbers and better with words when he trusted you enough to speak them. Malik connected with him fast. They shot hoops together after school, talked about respect, about pain, about how hard it was to be seen in a world that looked past you. Before long, other boys joined them, 5, 6, then a full dozen. They started calling him Coach Malik, though there was no formal team. Daniel noticed. Eleanor visited often, always carrying Tupperware of fresh cookies or banana bread. She sat on the bleachers during the after-school sessions, her eyes glistening as she watched Malik guide the boys with patience and strength. One evening, after a small fundraiser event, she approached him in the parking lot. "You've changed the atmosphere here, Malik. These boys look up to you. Daniel respects you. And so do I." Malik chuckled nervously. "I'm just doing what I wish someone had done for me." She studied him thoughtfully. "Would you have dinner with us this Sunday? At our home. Richard and Emily, my husband and daughter, would love to meet you." Malik raised an eyebrow. "Dinner at your house?" "Yes. I don't own a suit or anything fancy." Eleanor smiled. "You don't need one. Just bring your heart. That's more than enough." Sunday came faster than expected. Malik stared at his reflection before leaving. Fresh haircut, clean polo, the least worn jeans he owned. He looked presentable. Still, he felt like an imposter. The Whitmore estate was something out of a movie. Manicured hedges, brick driveway, a porch wrapped around the entire front like a gentle embrace. When he pulled up, Eleanor was already waiting outside. Inside, he was greeted by Richard Whitmore, a tall man with silver hair, piercing blue eyes, and a warmth that surprised Malik. Emily, a vibrant 21-year-old with a curious mind and a social work major, bombarded him with questions about the kids he mentored. Dinner was roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans, and sweet cornbread. Malik was quiet at first but found himself opening up. They listened. Genuinely. After dessert, Eleanor walked into his car beneath the soft light of a vintage lamppost. "You belong here," she said softly. He looked back at the glowing windows of the mansion. "I've never belonged anywhere like this." "You belong anywhere you bring light, Malik. And you've brought it in spades." As he drove back home, he realized something he hadn't dared believe in a long time. Maybe he wasn't just surviving anymore. Maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to live. Malik's heart thudded in his chest as he sat in the plush armchair of the Whitmore family's sunlit living room. The aroma of fresh coffee and vanilla-scented candles drifted through the air. The house was something straight out of a magazine, every detail meticulously curated, from the family portraits lining the fireplace mantel to the delicate china displayed behind glass. It was a world so far removed from the life Malik had known that it almost felt like a dream when he might wake up from any moment. Richard Whitmore, with his silver hair and tailored blazer, sat across from him, legs crossed casually, as if they had known each other for years. Eleanor, ever the gracious host, had set a tray of warm pastries on the coffee table, urging Malik to help himself. Emily perched on the armrest nearby, her notebook open, asking question after question about his experiences growing up, the challenges of inner-city life, the boys he mentored, and the dreams he still carried. It wasn't an interrogation. It was genuine curiosity, yet Malik felt exposed in a way he hadn't before. He spoke cautiously, words measured, trying to navigate the fine line between gratitude and dignity. Every part of him wanted to trust these people, but a small voice inside whispered, "Don't get too comfortable. You know how these stories end." And yet, it was hard not to feel something shift inside him. As the conversation flowed, Richard leaned forward, his hands steepled. "Tell me, Malik, what do you think these kids need most? The ones you're mentoring at the center." Malik hesitated, his mind racing. He thought of Jamal, of the way the boy's eyes lit up when he talked about wanting to be an engineer. He thought of the twins, Marcus and Malcolm, who came to the center to escape their mom's violent boyfriend. He thought of the girls who whispered about dreams they barely dared to believe in, college, careers, a future. "They need someone to believe in them," Malik said finally, his voice steady. "Someone who sees them for who they are, not just what the world expects them to become. They need chances, real chances, to grow into something more." Richard nodded slowly, as if considering Malik's words like a precious gem. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "What do you need, Malik?" The question caught him off guard. Malik faltered, glancing around the room, then down at his worn shoes. "I don't know. A fair shot, I guess. A chance to prove I'm more than the zip code I was born into. More than the statistics people expect me to become." There was a pause, a weight in the air. Eleanor reached over and gently touched his hand. "That's all anyone really wants, isn't it?" Malik looked at her, something breaking open inside him. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Weeks turned into months, and Malik's presence at the center grew. He became more than a volunteer, he became a mentor, a coach, a friend, a role model. His days were filled with purpose, organizing workshops, running after-school programs, and sitting one-on-one with kids who needed a safe space to vent. He started wearing collared shirts to the center, second-hand, but clean and pressed. He spoke at community meetings, his voice steady, his words thoughtful. People listened. They respected him. But not everyone approved. One evening, as Malik was locking up the center, he noticed a dark-colored sedan idling across the street. Two men inside, white, maybe late 30s, sat watching. Malik's skin prickled. He tried to ignore it, but as he walked toward the bus stop, the car pulled slowly alongside him. The window rolled down. "Hey, coach," one of the men sneered. "Funny how you're all cozy with the Whitmores now. You think you're better than the rest of us, huh?" Malik froze, his heart racing. The man's voice dripped with sarcasm, but underneath it, there was a sharp edge of something darker: resentment, maybe even hatred. "I'm just trying to help the kids," Malik said, forcing his voice to stay calm. The man laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Yeah, you keep telling yourself that. Just remember where you came from. People like you don't belong with people like them." The car sped off, tires spitting gravel, leaving Malik standing in the fading light, a sick feeling twisting in his gut. That night, he couldn't sleep. The man's words echoed in his mind, gnawing at his sense of belonging. Did he really fit into the world the Whitmores were offering him? Or was he just a charity case, a feel-good project for a rich family trying to ease their guilt? The next afternoon, as Malik helped Jamal with his algebra homework, he couldn't shake the doubt creeping in. Jamal sensed it too. "Coach Malik," Jamal said suddenly, frowning. "You okay? You seem, I dunno, different." Malik looked at the boy, this kid who had been written off by his teachers, by the system, by society, and saw the reflection of his own younger self staring back at him. He realized in that moment that he wasn't just doing this for the Whitmores, or even for himself. He was doing it for Jamal. For all the kids who had been told they didn't belong. For his own mother, who had worked 2 jobs and still barely scraped by. For his father, who had died too young. For the friends he'd lost to the streets. For everyone who'd ever been told, "People like you don't belong." By the time the center's annual fundraiser rolled around, Malik had become a fixture in the community. The event was a grand affair, held in the Whitmore's sprawling backyard under strings of fairy lights. Eleanor had insisted Malik sit at the head table with the family, introducing him to donors and city council members as a pillar of the community. He shook hands with people who barely looked at him, who smiled politely but whose eyes flickered with that same condescending curiosity he'd known all his life. Yet when he spoke about the center, about the kids, about the future they were building together, people listened. Really listened. Eleanor raised her glass in a toast. "To Malik Johnson, whose heart and determination are changing lives." Malik stood, the applause washing over him, and for the first time in a long, long while, he allowed himself to believe he belonged there. But as the night wound down, and the last of the guests trickled out, Malik noticed something that made his stomach twist: a dark figure watching from the edge of the property. The same man from the car. The man smirked, tipped an imaginary hat, and melted into the shadows. Malik's pulse pounded in his ears. The road ahead was far from smooth. But he was ready to fight. Malik didn't sleep that night. The image of the man at the edge of the property, standing there in the shadows like a ghost from his past, haunted him. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the glow of the streetlights casting long, uneven shapes across the walls. His mind buzzed with questions he couldn't answer. Who was this man? What did he want? And why couldn't Malik shake the feeling that no matter how far he tried to climb, the past would always find a way to pull him back down? The next morning, Malik forced himself out of bed, his body heavy with exhaustion. As he walked to the community center, the weight of everything pressed down on him: his responsibility to the kids, the judgmental stares he still sometimes caught when he entered the Whitmore's world, the quiet whispers of "he's not like us" that he'd learned to pretend he didn't hear. The pressure was unrelenting. Every day felt like a tightrope walk, a delicate balance between proving himself and staying true to who he was. At the center, Malik tried to hide his fatigue, but Jamal noticed right away. "Coach, you okay?" the boy asked, his voice low with concern. "Yeah, I'm good," Malik lied, forcing a smile. But Jamal wasn't fooled. The boy narrowed his eyes, then surprised Malik by asking, "You ever feel like, no matter what you do, people just see what they want to see?" The question hit Malik like a punch to the gut. He stared at Jamal for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, kid. I know exactly how that feels." That evening, as Malik sat alone in the center's office, a knock at the door startled him. He looked up to see Emily standing there, her notebook in hand, a worried look on her face. "Hey," she said softly. "You've been quiet today. What's going on?" Malik hesitated, then gestured for her to sit. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "It's just, sometimes I wonder if all this is really making a difference. If I'm making a difference." Emily tilted her head, studying him. "Of course you are. Look at Jamal, look at the twins, these kids light up when they see you. They believe in themselves because you believe in them." Malik rubbed a hand over his face, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "Yeah, but it feels like for every step forward, there's someone waiting to push me back. Like that guy at the fundraiser." He stopped himself, the words catching in his throat. Did he really want to drag Emily into this? She caught the hesitation. "What guy?" Malik sighed, leaning forward. He told her about the car, the man's cold words, the figure in the shadows. As he spoke, Emily's expression darkened. "Do you know who he is?" she asked, her voice tight. Malik shook his head. "No. But I have a feeling he knows me." Emily scribbled something in her notebook, then looked up. "Malik, you're doing something big here. That's going to make people uncomfortable. People who don't want to see change." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Malik nodded slowly, the knot in his stomach tightening. The next day, Malik tried to push the worry aside. There was too much to do planning the upcoming job fair for the kids, coordinating with local businesses, and helping Jamal study for his algebra test. But the unease lingered, gnawing at the edges of his focus. Later that week, as he left the center late in the evening, he noticed the same dark sedan parked across the street. His pulse spiked. He crossed the street, heart hammering in his chest, and approached the car. But before he could say a word, the engine roared to life, and the car sped off into the night. Malik stood there, breathless, the cold air stinging his face. A mix of fear and fury surged through him. He couldn't let this go on. But what could he do? He didn't want to bring trouble to the Whitmore's doorstep. He didn't want to scare the kids. But he couldn't ignore it, either. That weekend, at the Whitmore's estate, Malik sat with Richard in the study. The older man poured them each a glass of bourbon and listened quietly as Malik recounted the encounters with the mysterious man. Richard's expression darkened, a frown tugging at the corners of his mouth. When Malik finished, Richard tapped his fingers against the crystal glass, deep in thought. "Malik, I don't say this lightly, but you may need to be careful. When you challenge the status quo, when you start giving a voice to the voiceless, you make enemies. And some of them, they don't play fair." Malik's throat tightened. "So what do I do? Quit? Walk away?" Richard shook his head, his eyes sharp. "No. You keep going. You keep fighting. And you let us help you." For the first time in days, Malik felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't alone in this. The Whitmores were in his corner. Maybe that made him a target, but it also made him stronger. But just as things seemed to stabilize, another storm loomed on the horizon. One afternoon, as Malik walked Jamal home, a police cruiser slowly crept up behind them. The lights weren't on, the siren wasn't blaring, just a quiet, menacing presence. The officer inside, a stocky white man with a buzz cut, rolled down the window and called out. "Hey! You two, where you headed?" Jamal stiffened beside Malik, his eyes wide with fear. Malik forced himself to stay calm, his voice even. "Just walking the kid home, officer." The cop's eyes narrowed. "Funny. You match the description of someone we're looking for." Malik's jaw clenched. He knew this game. Did you fit the description routine? He'd lived it before. He placed a hand gently on Jamal's shoulder, trying to shield him. "We're just heading home," Malik said again, slower this time. The officer stared for a moment longer, then muttered, "Watch yourself," before driving off. Jamal looked up at Malik, his voice barely a whisper. "They always do that to you?" Malik exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of centuries in his bones. Yeah, kid. They do. That night, Malik sat in his apartment, staring out the window at the city lights. His mind raced with thoughts about the man in the car, about the cop, about the delicate dance he was doing between two worlds. He thought about his mother, who had done her best in a world that had given her so little. He thought about the kids, about Jamal, about the fragile hopes they carried. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more shadows, more threats, more battles to fight. But he also knew he wasn't the same man he'd been when he first started this journey. He was stronger now. Wiser. More determined than ever. And he wasn't going to stop. Malik awoke before dawn, the early morning light just beginning to creep across the horizon, casting a soft golden hue over the city. He sat at the small kitchen table in his apartment, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. His coffee sat untouched, growing cold as his mind spun with the weight of everything that had happened. The encounter with the cop, the dark car, the threats lingering in the shadows, it was a storm Malik hadn't fully prepared for. Yet as the sun slowly rose, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange, Malik felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The fear was still there, coiled tight in his chest, but beneath it was a stubborn, unshakable resolve. He couldn't let them win. Not now. Not ever. Later that day, Malik walked into the community center to find the kids already waiting for him, Jamal in particular, who seemed unusually fidgety, glancing around like he was expecting something bad to happen. "Hey, coach," Jamal greeted, his voice quieter than usual. "Hey, champ. What's up?" Jamal hesitated, then mumbled, "There's a guy, he's been hanging around outside. Tall, white guy in a suit. He was asking questions about you." Malik's stomach dropped. He forced himself to keep his voice calm. "You did the right thing telling me, okay? Just stay inside today. Stick with Emily or Ms. Lopez if I'm not around." Jamal nodded, his eyes wide with worry. Malik ruffled his hair gently and turned toward the window. The figure Jamal had described was gone, but Malik knew this wasn't over. It was a reminder that no matter how far he'd come, there were still those who wanted to keep him in his place, or worse, erase him entirely. That afternoon, as Malik prepared for the job fair he'd organized for the kids, the Whitmores arrived. Richard and Evelyn stepped into the bustling center, watching the students nervously adjust ties and smooth down dresses as they prepared to meet potential employers. "Malik," Richard said, his voice warm but edged with concern. "You've built something remarkable here." "Thanks," Malik replied, though the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. "But there's something you need to know." He told them everything: the man in the car, the threats, the cop's harassment. Richard's jaw tightened, and Evelyn's face paled. They exchanged a look, one that said more than words ever could. "You're not alone in this," Evelyn said firmly, her voice steady. "We'll make some calls. We know people who can help." Malik hesitated, a lump forming in his throat. The offer felt like a lifeline, but accepting help from the Whitmores also made him feel exposed, vulnerable in a way he didn't like. Yet, maybe this was what community really meant, leaning on each other when the storms came. He nodded slowly. "Okay. Thank you." The job fair was a success. Kids left with business cards, internship offers, and a new sense of purpose. Malik watched Jamal chat excitedly with a recruiter from a tech company, his face lit with hope, and for a moment, the weight on Malik's shoulders felt lighter. But as the event wound down, Malik received a text from an unknown number. "This is bigger than you. Walk away, or we'll make you disappear." His stomach twisted. He felt the familiar knot of fear tighten in his chest, but this time, something snapped inside him. He was done being afraid. He was done running. That night, Malik sat in his apartment, staring at the message, then at the framed photo of his mother on the wall. He thought about the long, hard road that had brought him here, the nights he'd gone to bed hungry, the times he'd been chased by cops for doing nothing, the years he'd spent fighting for every scrap of dignity. He thought about Jamal, about the kids who looked up to him like he was the only person who'd ever believed in them. He thought about the Whitmores, about the bridges he'd built, the walls he'd knocked down. And he thought about the man in the car, the shadows in the alley, the threats whispered like poison in his ear. He wasn't going to let them win. He picked up his phone, his fingers steady, and texted back. Do what you have to do. I'm not backing down. The next morning, Malik arrived at the center to find news cameras parked outside. A local reporter approached, microphone in hand. Mr. Jackson, can we get a statement on the threats you've received? Do you believe this is connected to your work in the community? Malik blinked, stunned. How had the media found out? Then he saw Emily standing nearby, a determined look on her face, holding a folder of documents. I thought it was time your story got told, she said quietly. Malik's heart clenched. He stepped in front of the cameras, the weight of the moment heavy on his shoulders. I'm not afraid, he said, his voice clear and steady. This community has been ignored, overlooked, and underestimated for too long. We're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. The cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. And somewhere in the crowd, Malik thought he saw the dark figure again, but this time, the man wasn't smirking. He looked worried. Weeks later, things began to shift. The threats stopped. The job fair partnerships grew. The kids thrived. And Malik felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Malik stood on the steps of the community center, watching the kids play basketball in the fading light. Jamal ran up to him, breathless and grinning. Coach! I got the internship. They said they picked me 'cause I was the most prepared. Malik laughed, clapping the boy on the shoulder. That's what happens when you work hard, kid. As the stars began to appear, Malik thought about everything he'd been through, about the fear, the fights, the nights he'd doubted himself. And he realized that he wasn't just building a center for the kids. He was building a legacy. A new story for his community. A story of resilience, of courage, of standing tall even when the world tries to push you down. And as he looked out over the city, the weight in his chest lifted, just a little. He smiled, a quiet, fierce smile, and whispered to himself. We're just getting started.